You must also agree, however, that there are some capital virtues in this woman, brilliant features. I even wanted to cry out to her just now, if only I could have allowed myself to do it in that bedlam, that she herself was my best defense against all her accusations. Well, who wouldn't be captivated by this woman on occasion to the point of forgetting all reason, and the rest? Look, that boor Rogojin came lugging 100,000 to her. Let's say everything that happened there tonight was ephemeral, romantic, indecent, but, on the other hand, it was colorful, it was original, you must agree. God, what might have come from such a character and with such beauty? But, despite all my efforts, even education, all is lost. A diamond in the rough, I've said it many times. And Afanasy Ivanovich sighed deeply. Part 2. A couple of days after the strange adventure at Nastasia Filipovna's party, with which we ended the first part of our story, Prince Mishkin hastened to leave for Moscow on the business of receiving his unexpected inheritance. It was said then that there might have been other reasons for such a hasty departure, but of that, as well as of the prince's adventures in Moscow and generally in the course of his absence from Petersburg, we can supply very little information. The prince was away for exactly 6 months, and even those who had certain reasons to be interested in his fate could find out very little about him during all that time. True, some sort of rumors reached some of them, though very rarely, but these were mostly strange and almost always contradicted each other. The greatest interest in the prince was shown, of course, in the house of the Epanchins, to whom he had even had no time to say goodbye as he was leaving. The general, however, had seen him then, even 2 or 3 times, they had discussed something seriously. But if Epanchin himself had seen him, he had not informed his family of it. And, generally, at first, that is, for nearly a whole month after the prince's departure, talk of him was avoided in the Epanchin's house. Only the general's wife, Lizaveta Prokofyevna, voiced her opinion at the very beginning, that she had been sadly mistaken about the prince. Then after 2 or 3 days she added, though without mentioning the prince now, but vaguely, that the chiefest feature of her life was to be constantly mistaken about people. And finally, 10 days later, being vexed with her daughters over something, she concluded with the utterance, "Enough mistakes. There will be no more of them." We cannot help noting here that for a long time a certain unpleasant mood existed in their house. There was something heavy, strained, unspoken, quarrelsome. Everyone scowled. The general was busy day and night, taken up with his affairs. Rarely had anyone seen him so busy and active, especially with official work. The family hardly managed to catch a glimpse of him. As for the Epanchine girls, they, of course, said nothing openly. It may be that they said very little even when they were by themselves. They were proud girls, arrogant, and sometimes bashful even among themselves, but nevertheless they understood each other not only from the first word but even from the first glance, so that sometimes there was no need to say much. An outside observer, if there had happened to be one, could have come to only one conclusion, that, judging by all the aforementioned facts, few as they were, the prince had managed in any case to leave a certain impression in the Epanchins' house, though he had appeared there only once, and that fleetingly. It may have been an impression of simple curiosity, explainable by some of the prince's extraordinary adventures. Be that as it may, the impression remained. Gradually the rumors that had begun to spread around town also managed to be shrouded in the darkness of ignorance. True, tales were told of some little fool of a prince, no one could name him for certain, who had suddenly inherited an enormous fortune and married some traveling Frenchwoman, a famous can-can dancer from the Château des Fleurs in Paris. But others said that the inheritance had gone to some general, and the one who had married the traveling Frenchwoman and famous can-can dancer was a Russian merchant, an enormously wealthy man, who, at the wedding, drunk, merely to show off, had burned up in a candle exactly 700,000 worth of the latest lottery tickets. But all these rumors died down very quickly, a result to which circumstances contributed greatly. For instance, Rogojin's entire company, many of whom could have told a thing or two, set off in its whole bulk, with Rogojin himself at its head, for Moscow, almost exactly a week after a terrible orgy in the Ekaterinhof Vauxhall, one at which Nastasia Philippovna had also been present. Some people, the very few who were interested, learned from other rumors that Nastasia Philippovna had fled the day after Ekaterinhof, had vanished, and had finally been traced, having gone off to Moscow, so that Rogozhin's departure for Moscow came out as being somewhat coincident with this rumor. A rumor also went around concerning Gavrila Ardalionovich of Volgin himself, who was also quite well known in his circle. But with him, too, a circumstance occurred which soon quickly cooled and ultimately stopped entirely all unkind stories concerning him. He became very ill and was unable to appear not only anywhere in society but also at his work. After a month of illness, he recovered, but for some reason gave up his job in the stock company, and his place was taken by someone else. He also did not appear even once in General Epanchin's house, so that the general, too, had to hire another clerk. Gavrila Ardalionovich's enemies might have supposed that he was so embarrassed by everything that had happened to him that he was even ashamed to go out, but he was indeed a bit unwell. He even fell into hypochondria, became pensive, irritable. That same winter Varvara Ardalionovna married Tin. Everybody who knew them ascribed this marriage directly to the circumstance that Ganya refused to go back to work and not only stopped supporting his family but even began to need help and almost to be looked after himself. Let us note parenthetically that Gavrila Ardalionovich was never even mentioned in the Epanchin's house, as if there had been no such person in the world, let alone in their house. And yet they all learned, and even quite soon, a very remarkable circumstance about him, namely, on that same night that was so fatal for him, after the unpleasant adventure at Nastasia Philippovna's, Ganya, having returned home, did not go to bed, but began waiting with feverish impatience for the prince to come back. The prince, who had gone to Ekaterinhof, came back after 5 in the morning. Then Ganya went to his room and placed before him on the table the charred packet of money, given to him by Nastasia Philippovna while he lay in a swoon. He insistently begged the prince to return this gift to Nastasia Philippovna at the first opportunity. When Ganya entered the prince's room, he was in a hostile and nearly desperate mood, but it seemed some words were exchanged between him and the prince, after which Ganya sat with him for 2 hours and spent the whole time weeping bitterly. The two parted on friendly terms. This news, which reached all the Epanchins, was, as later events confirmed, perfectly accurate. Of course, it was strange that news of this sort could travel and become known so quickly. For instance, everything that had happened at Nastasia Filipovna's became known at the Epanchins almost the next day, and even in quite accurate detail. Concerning the news about Gavrila Ardalionovich, it might be supposed that it was brought to the Epanchins by Varvara Ardalionovna, who somehow suddenly appeared among the Epanchin girls and very soon was even on a very intimate footing with them, which for Lizaveta Prokofyevna was extremely surprising. But though Varvara Ardalionovna for some reason found it necessary to become so close with the Epanchins, she surely would not have talked with them about her brother. She, too, was a very proud woman, in her own way, despite the fact that she had struck up a friendship there, where her brother had almost been thrown out. Before then, though she had been acquainted with the Epanchin girls, she had seen them rarely. Even now, however, she almost never appeared in the drawing room, and came in, or rather, dropped in, by the back door.